I heard the number before I understood it. $200,000. That's how much my mother-in-law paid my husband to divorce me. $200,000, wired into a checking account I didn't know existed, on a Tuesday afternoon in March, while I was at home making his favorite dinner. Because he'd told me that morning he'd had a rough week and could use something comforting. I was browning onions and seasoning short ribs and setting the table with cloth napkins, because I still believed that small gestures held a marriage together. And across town, his mother was writing a check to make me disappear. She paid him the way you'd pay an exterminator, a service fee for removing something unpleasant from a property she considered hers. $200,000 to erase 9 years of marriage, a woman who loved her son, and any future grandchildren she might have had to share with someone she deemed unworthy of the family name. I found out about the money 11 days later, but I found out about everything else in a courtroom for months after that, and when the judge read her ruling, my mother-in-law screamed, not gasped, not protested, screamed. The sound bounced off the wood-paneled walls and hung in the air like something broken, and every person in that room turned to look at the woman who had always controlled everything and was learning, for the first time in her life, what it feels like when control is taken away. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you've ever had someone try to buy your life out from under you, stay with me. This one's going to land differently than you expect. My name is Claire Whitfield, and I married Nathan Harding when I was 25 years old. I need you to understand that I loved this man, not the cautious, conditional love that comes from settling or convenience, but the deep, stupid, reckless love that makes you rearrange your entire life around another person and feel grateful for the opportunity. Nathan was gentle, quiet in a way that felt intentional, like he was choosing his words carefully because he respected the weight of them. He was the kind of man who remembered your coffee order after hearing it once, who noticed when you got a haircut before you mentioned it, who put his hand on the small of your back when you walked through a doorway, like he was saying, I'm right here, without needing to speak. I loved him for those things. I loved him for who he was when it was just the two of us, alone in our apartment on Sunday mornings, eating scrambled eggs and reading different sections of the same newspaper. That Nathan was real. That Nathan was mine. The problem was that Nathan was also his mother's, and his mother had no interest in sharing. Gloria Harding was the kind of wealthy that doesn't announce itself with flash but makes itself known through quiet, absolute authority. She didn't wear designer logos on the outside of her clothes. She didn't drive a car that screamed money. She lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in a neighborhood where the lawns looked like they'd been measured with rulers. And she held her wealth the way some women hold grudges, close to the chest, always ready to deploy when necessary. Her husband, Nathan's father, had died when Nathan was 14, leaving behind a construction supply company that Gloria ran with the same iron precision she applied to everything else in her life. She turned a modest family business into a regional operation worth several $1,000,000, and I'll give her credit for that. She was smart, disciplined, and tireless. What she was not, what she had never learned to be, was kind. Gloria decided she didn't like me before I'd finished my first sentence. I know that sounds dramatic, but Nathan confirmed it years later. The first time he brought me home for dinner, I'd walked through the front door, extended my hand, and said, "It's so wonderful to finally meet you, Mrs. Harding. Nathan talks about you all the time." And Gloria had looked at my hand, then at my face, then at my shoes, which were from Target, and apparently communicated everything she needed to know about my net worth. She shook my hand the way you'd handle a fish. You didn't intend to keep. Brief contact, immediate release. That night, she called Nathan and told him I seemed like a sweet girl but not someone with the background to understand the responsibilities of being part of a family like theirs. A family like theirs. As if the Hardings were the Kennedys instead of a woman who sold plumbing fixtures and her 3 sons who had done nothing remarkable except be born to a mother with money. I came from a family that didn't have money, and Gloria made sure I never forgot it. My parents were good people who worked hard and struggled constantly. My father drove a delivery truck for 30 years. My mother cleaned houses for families not unlike Gloria's families, where the wife stayed home and managed the help, and considered that a career. I was the first person in my family to finish college, a degree in education from a state university that Gloria referred to once as that little school you attended, as if a degree only counted when the tuition required a second mortgage. Nathan and I got married despite Gloria's objections. She attended the wedding wearing black, which she claimed was coincidental, and she gave a toast at the reception that managed to be 4 minutes long without once mentioning my name. She wished her son happiness. She praised his judgment in general terms. She expressed confidence that he would always make decisions that honored the Harding family legacy. And then she sat down and didn't speak to me for the rest of the evening. Our wedding photos show a woman in the background of nearly every shot, watching the proceedings with the expression of someone waiting for a mistake she could point to later. The first 3 years were manageable. Nathan and I built a life that felt genuinely ours. He worked for his mother's company because that was always the expectation, but he was good at his job and took pride in it. I taught 4th grade at an elementary school 12 minutes from our house, and I loved it with a ferocity that surprised me. There's something about standing in front of a room full of 9-year-olds that forces you to believe in potential, in the idea that people can grow and change and become more than the circumstances they were born into. I needed that belief. Gloria was working very hard to take it from me. Her campaign was patient and methodical. She didn't attack me directly. She was far too sophisticated for that. Instead, she worked on Nathan, slowly, consistently, the way water works on stone. She'd invite him to lunch alone and mention, casually, that she'd seen a financial advisor who told her the family assets needed to be protected. Protected from what? Nathan would ask. From risk, Gloria would say, letting the word hang in the air like smoke, trusting her son to fill in the blank with my name. She questioned every purchase I made, not to my face, but through Nathan. She thought maybe I was spending a little freely on groceries. Had I really needed a new winter coat when last year's still fit? She noticed I'd gotten my hair highlighted and wondered if that was the best use of the household budget, as if my teacher's salary was somehow her business to audit. The genius of Gloria's strategy was that she never positioned herself as the villain. She positioned herself as a concerned mother, a wise advisor, a woman who had built a fortune through discipline and caution and simply wanted to pass those values to her son. She made her interference feel like love. And Nathan, who had been receiving that particular brand of love his entire life, couldn't tell the difference between a mother who cared and a mother who controlled. To him, they were the same thing. By year 5, I could feel Nathan changing. It wasn't sudden. It was like watching a photograph fade. The colors were still there but muted, less vivid, less true. He started repeating Gloria's opinions as if they were his own. He started questioning my spending the way she did, with that same tone of concerned reasonableness that made you feel crazy for being offended. He started canceling our plans when Gloria needed him for something, which was increasingly often and increasingly urgent, though the urgencies were always vague and somehow resolved the moment I was no longer expected anywhere. I tried talking to him about it, multiple times. Each conversation followed the same pattern. I would raise a concern. Nathan would tell me I was overreacting. I would provide specific examples. Nathan would say his mother meant well, and eventually, the conversation would end with me apologizing for creating tension. Every single time. I walked into those conversations holding my ground and walked out wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. Later, I learned there's a word for that, but at the time, I just thought I was bad at communicating. Year 7 was when things began to collapse in earnest. Gloria started talking about the family estate plan with increasing frequency, always in Nathan's presence, always making sure I understood that the Harding assets were Harding assets and that protecting them was a matter of legacy and responsibility. She hired an estate attorney and invited Nathan to the meetings but not me. When I asked about it, Nathan said it was just boring legal stuff and that his mother wanted to keep the meetings small. Small meaning everyone in the family except the person Gloria had never considered family in the first place. I should have seen what was coming. The signs were all there, lined up like dominoes, and I was standing at the end of the row wondering why I felt a breeze. But when you love someone, when you've built nearly a decade of life around the belief that you and this person are a team, you don't see the exit strategy being constructed right behind your back. You see what you want to see. You see the man who still reaches for your hand sometimes in the dark. You see Sunday morning scrambled eggs and you think that's the real thing and everything else is noise. The noise became a siren on a Thursday evening in March. Nathan came home from work and he looked wrong. Not angry, not sad, guilty. There's a specific expression that guilt creates on a human face, a tightness around the eyes combined with an inability to look directly at you, and I recognized it the moment he walked through the door. "What's wrong?" I asked. I was grading papers at the kitchen table, red pen in hand, a stack of fourth grade book reports in front of me. He sat down across from me, but didn't take off his jacket, like a man who was planning to leave again soon. "Claire, my mom thinks we should separate. Your mom thinks we should separate," I repeated, tasting each word like something gone sour. "She thinks it's best for both of us, for our futures. And what do you think?" The pause lasted 3 full seconds. I counted. In those 3 seconds, I felt our entire marriage shift beneath me like a floor giving way. Because if Nathan had to think about whether he wanted to stay married to me, the answer was already no. A man who loves you doesn't pause. A man who loves you doesn't deliver his mother's opinion like a courier and wait to see which way the wind blows before choosing his own position. "I think she might be right," he said. There it was. 9 years of love and labor and compromise and patience and Sunday mornings and cloth napkins and parent-teacher conferences and holidays spent performing gratitude at Gloria's table and weeknights spent lying next to a man I was slowly losing to a woman who had never let go of him in the first place. All of it reduced to 5 words delivered in someone else's voice. I didn't cry. I wanted to. I could feel the tears sitting behind my eyes like a crowd pressing against a locked door. But something told me that crying in front of Nathan at that moment would be a mistake. Not because crying is weakness, it isn't, but because I could see in his face that he expected me to cry. He expected me to fall apart and beg and plead and make this easy for him by being the mess his mother had always said I'd become. And I refused to give either of them the satisfaction. "Okay," I said. "Then we should talk about how to do this respectfully." The relief on his face was the cruelest thing I'd ever seen in my marriage. He was relieved that I wasn't fighting. Relieved that the woman he'd promised to love until death was quietly agreeing to die. That relief told me everything I needed to know about who Nathan had become and how little of the man I'd married was still inside him. I spent the next 11 days in a state of focused, deliberate calm that felt like piloting a plane through a storm. On the outside, I was composed. I went to work. I taught my classes. I graded papers. I packed boxes in the evenings with the methodical precision of someone who understands that falling apart is a luxury she cannot currently afford. On the inside, I was running calculations, not emotional calculations, financial ones. Because here's something Gloria didn't know about me, something Nathan didn't know either, because he'd never bothered to ask. During 9 years of marriage, while I was being dismissed as a woman with no financial sophistication, I had been paying very close attention to everything. Gloria had made sure I was excluded from the estate planning meetings, but she hadn't made sure I was excluded from the mail. Nathan's documents came to our house: bank statements, investment summaries, tax forms, correspondence from attorneys. Nathan never opened any of it because Nathan found paperwork boring and had always let his mother handle it, the way he let everyone else handle everything while he collected the credit for showing up. I opened all of it, not out of suspicion initially, out of responsibility. Someone needed to understand our financial picture, and since Nathan wouldn't do it and Gloria wouldn't include me, I did it myself. I kept copies. I organized them in a filing system in the back of our bedroom closet, behind the winter coats. Nathan never moved because he never put away his own clothes. On day 11, I found the $200,000. I was reviewing a bank statement that had arrived 2 days earlier, a statement for an account I hadn't known about until that moment. A checking account in Nathan's name only, opened 3 months before he sat down at the kitchen table and told me his mother thought we should separate. And there it was, a single deposit, $200,000, wired from an account held by Harding Family Holdings LLC, Gloria's company, Gloria's money, deposited into Nathan's secret account exactly 4 days before he came home looking guilty and delivered his rehearsed speech about what his mother thought was best. She had paid him, literally, financially, transactionally paid her own son to leave his wife, like settling a debt, like closing an account, like buying an unwanted tenant out of a lease she'd never agreed to in the first place. I sat on the edge of my bed with that bank statement in my hands and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, something more useful. The absolute crystalline clarity that comes when you finally see the full picture and realize you've been looking at a cropped version for years. I wasn't losing my marriage. My marriage had been taken from me, purchased out from under me by a woman who believed that everything and everyone had a price and who had finally found her sons. I called a lawyer the next morning, not just any lawyer. I called Diane Prescott, a family law attorney I'd read about in a local magazine profile that described her as the attorney you hire when the other side thinks they've already won. Diane was 57 years old with silver hair she wore in a braid and eyes that looked like they'd seen every version of human selfishness and were no longer impressed by any of them. I sat in her office and laid out everything. The marriage, Gloria, the estate meetings I'd been excluded from, the bank account, the $200,000, the 9 years of systematic marginalization disguised as family concern. Diane listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for about 10 seconds, flipping through the copies I'd brought, the bank statements, the tax forms, the investment summaries, the correspondence, every document I'd collected and organized over nearly a decade. Then she looked up at me with an expression I can only describe as professionally delighted. Your mother-in-law made 3 very serious mistakes, Diane said. She leaned back in her chair. First, she paid your husband to divorce you, which in this state constitutes interference with a marital relationship and can be used to establish tortious conduct. Second, she did it through a business account, which creates a paper trail that she cannot deny, dispute, or explain away. And third, and this is my personal favorite, she assumed you were too stupid to find it. I felt something warm spread through my chest. Not revenge, recognition, the feeling of being seen by someone who understood exactly what had been done to me, and exactly what could be done about it. Over the next 4 months, Diane built a case that was less like a legal filing and more like an autopsy of the Harding family's financial anatomy. She subpoenaed records from Harding Family Holdings. She deposed Gloria's estate attorney, a nervous man named Wendell who sweated through his dress shirt and kept saying he'd advised against this course of action. She obtained Nathan's complete financial records, including the secret checking account, credit card statements showing purchases made with Gloria's money, and a series of text messages between Nathan and his mother that read less like a mother-son relationship and more like a business negotiation. The text messages were devastating. Gloria had been explicit. If you file before the end of the quarter, I'll add another $50,000. Make sure she doesn't get a forensic accountant. Tell your lawyer to push for mediation because judges ask too many questions. And the one that made Diane smile her sharpest smile. She's a school teacher, Nathan. She can't afford to fight us. Let her take whatever we offer and be done with it. A school teacher. She'd said it the same way she'd said that little school you attended. Like my profession, the thing I'd devoted my career to, the work that mattered to me more than anything Gloria had ever built with her plumbing supply fortune, was something to be pitied, something small, something that confirmed everything she'd always believed about who I was and what I was worth. What Gloria didn't know, what Nathan didn't know, what nobody knew except Diane and me, was that the school teacher had been doing her homework for 9 years, and the school teacher was about to turn it in. The hearing was scheduled for a Monday morning in July. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more functional than dramatic, with fluorescent lighting and chairs that squeaked against the floor. Nathan sat at the opposing table with his attorney, a man from a large firm that Gloria had selected and was presumably paying for. Gloria herself sat in the gallery directly behind Nathan, wearing a cream-colored blazer and an expression of absolute confidence. She looked at me when I walked in and gave me the smallest nod, the kind of acknowledgement you'd give a waitress you don't intend to tip. Nathan wouldn't meet my eyes. He stared at the table in front of him with the focused attention of a man trying to disappear into furniture. Whatever guilt he'd felt 4 months ago had hardened into something that looked like resentment, probably because it's easier to resent the person you've wronged than to sit with the wrongness itself. Nathan's attorney went first. He presented their proposed settlement with the smooth confidence of someone who'd been told this was going to be straightforward. An equitable division of shared assets. The house sold, proceeds split, retirement accounts divided, no alimony, given that both parties were employed and capable of self-support. Clean, simple, fair, in the way that word is used when it benefits the person using it. Then Diane stood up. Your Honor, before we discuss the proposed settlement, I'd like to introduce evidence regarding the circumstances under which this divorce was initiated. Nathan's attorney objected immediately. Your Honor, the circumstances of the marital breakdown are not relevant to asset division. Judge Carolyn Porter, a woman in her early 60s with short gray hair and glasses she kept pushing up her nose, looked at Diane. Counselor, where are you going with this? Your Honor, I intend to demonstrate that this divorce was not initiated by either spouse voluntarily. It was purchased by a third party with the specific intent of defrauding my client of her marital rights. The temperature in the room shifted. Nathan's attorney started whispering urgently to Nathan. Behind them, I watched Gloria's confident expression flicker for the first time, like a candle touched by a draft. Proceed, Judge Porter said. Diane presented everything: the bank account, the $200,000 wire transfer, the text messages, the deposition from Gloria's own attorney confirming that he'd been instructed to structure the payment in a way that would not appear in marital asset disclosures. She presented it all calmly, methodically, without drama, letting the documents speak in their own devastating language. She showed the court that Gloria had opened the account in Nathan's name using her authority as his employer at Harding Family Holdings. She showed that the money had been characterized as a bonus to avoid gift tax implications, a decision that Wendell, the estate attorney, had flagged as potentially fraudulent and had been overruled by Gloria. She showed the text messages one by one, reading them into the record while Gloria sat behind her son and watched her own words projected onto a screen for the judge to read. She's a schoolteacher, Nathan. She can't afford to fight us. Judge Porter read that message 3 times. I watched her eyes move across it, back to the beginning, across again. Then she took off her glasses and looked directly at Gloria. Mrs. Harding, are you the author of this text message? Gloria's attorney, a separate attorney from Nathan's, stood up. My client respectfully declines to answer at this time. This isn't a criminal proceeding, counselor. Your client isn't being asked to incriminate herself. She's being asked to confirm the authenticity of evidence. Mrs. Harding, did you send this message? Gloria stood up slowly. She was tall, which I'd always noticed, the kind of tall that she used like architecture, building herself upward so everyone else felt smaller. Yes, she said. Her voice was controlled. I sent it, but the context is being misrepresented. I was protecting my son from a woman who married him for financial advantage. The courtroom went very quiet. Diane didn't move. She didn't need to. She just let Gloria's words sit in the air and do their own work. Judge Porter looked at me, then at Gloria, then back at the screen showing the text messages. Mrs. Harding, the evidence before me suggests that you paid your son $200,000 to initiate a divorce from his wife. Is that accurate? I provided my son with financial support during a difficult transition. How that support was used was his decision. The transfer occurred for days before your son informed his wife of his desire to separate. The account was opened 3 months prior and was not disclosed in marital financial statements. Your own attorney has testified under deposition that he was instructed to structure the payment to avoid detection. Gloria's composure cracked. Not visibly, not in any way a photograph would capture, but I could see it. The micro-expression around her mouth, the slight tightening of her hands on the back of the bench. She was not accustomed to being questioned, and she was certainly not accustomed to being questioned by someone she couldn't buy, fire, or outlast. Nathan's attorney attempted to redirect. Your Honor, regardless of the source of funds in my client's personal account, the proposed settlement remains equitable based on the marital asset pool. Diane responded without raising her voice. Your Honor, the $200,000 was paid as consideration for Mr. Harding to initiate divorce proceedings. This constitutes third-party tortious interference with a marital relationship. Under state law, my client is entitled to pursue a separate civil action against Mrs. Gloria Harding for damages. However, more immediately relevant to this proceeding, the payment demonstrates that the marital breakdown was engineered rather than organic, and that Mr. Harding's financial disclosures have been deliberately incomplete, as he failed to disclose the existence of this account and these funds. Judge Porter was writing. She wrote for a long time. The only sounds in the courtroom were the scratch of her pen and the squeak of Nathan shifting in his chair. Then the judge spoke, and this is the part I will remember for the rest of my life. Not because of what she said about money or assets or legal remedies, but because of one sentence buried in the middle of her ruling that cut through everything like sunlight through a window. This court finds that Mrs. Harding, the elder, engaged in a deliberate and premeditated campaign to end her son's marriage through financial inducement. The court further finds that Mr. Harding failed to disclose material financial assets during discovery, rendering his proposed settlement fundamentally dishonest. However, what the court finds most troubling is the apparent belief by both Mr. Harding and his mother that the petitioner, a woman who has worked as a public school educator for over a decade, who has contributed materially and substantially to the marital household, and who has conducted herself throughout these proceedings with remarkable dignity, could be disposed of through a financial transaction as if she were an inconvenience rather than a human being. Gloria's scream came during the remedy. Judge Porter awarded me 70% of all marital assets. She ordered the $200,000 returned to the marital estate as an undisclosed asset, then awarded me the entirety of it as compensatory relief. She granted me exclusive possession of the marital home. She ordered Nathan to pay spousal support for a period of 5 years, and she referred the matter of Gloria's payment to the State Bar's Ethics Board for review of the conduct of any attorneys who facilitated the transaction. The scream was not a word. It was just sound, raw, disbelieving, furious sound from a woman who had walked into that courtroom certain she had already won and was discovering in real time that certainty purchased with money is not the same thing as certainty earned through truth. Gloria stood up, screamed, and then sat back down so hard the bench shuddered. Her attorney put a hand on her arm. Nathan turned around and looked at his mother with an expression I'd never seen on his face before, something between horror and recognition. The dawning, too late understanding that the woman who'd been making his decisions for 34 years had just made the one that cost him everything. I sat still through all of it, hands folded, breathing even, not because I wasn't feeling anything, but because I was feeling so much that any movement would have broken the container. Relief, grief, vindication, loss. They don't cancel each other out, the good feelings and the bad ones. They just coexist, layered on top of each other like paint on a canvas, each one changing the color of the one beneath it. Nathan tried to talk to me in the hallway afterward. Claire, I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't think she'd actually. He couldn't finish the sentence. You didn't think I agreed. That's exactly right. You didn't think about what it would mean. You didn't think about what it said about our marriage, that your mother could buy your way out of it with a wire transfer. You didn't think about me at all. I did think about you. His voice broke. I thought about you every day. No, Nathan. You thought about what to do with me. That's different. He had no response. Some truths are too precise to argue with. They just land where they land and leave a mark. I walked out of the courthouse into July sunlight so bright it made my eyes water, or maybe that was something else. Diane walked beside me, carrying her briefcase with the satisfied ease of a woman who had done exactly what she'd set out to do. How do you feel? She asked. Like I just finished a very long exam, I said. And I think I passed. She laughed. You passed. You passed beautifully. That was 5 months ago. I still live in the house. I repainted the bedroom, the room where Nathan and I had slept for 9 years, a shade of blue I'd always loved but never chosen because Nathan preferred gray. I replaced the furniture piece by piece, not out of anger but because I wanted to sit in chairs that were chosen by me, for me, with no one else's preference outweighing my own. I went back to teaching in September. My 4th graders this year are wild and wonderful, and they have no idea that their teacher spent her summer in a courtroom fighting for her right to exist as a full human being. They just know that Mrs. Whitfield gives good book recommendations and lets them have extra recess on Fridays when it's warm enough. That's enough. That's more than enough. Nathan sends me a check every month. Spousal support, court-ordered, arriving with the regularity of a man who has been told what will happen if he misses a payment. I deposit it without ceremony. The money doesn't feel like victory. It feels like arithmetic, a number on a page reflecting a debt that can be quantified even if the damage it represents cannot. Gloria has not spoken to me since the courtroom. I've heard through the grapevine that she hired a new estate attorney and restructured her company's holdings. I've heard she tells people the judge was biased and her attorney was incompetent, and the whole thing was a miscarriage of justice orchestrated by a vindictive woman who married her son for money. The irony of that accusation, coming from a woman who literally used money to try to end my marriage, is so perfect, it almost feels fictional. But that's the thing about people like Gloria. They never see themselves in the story they're telling about everyone else. Nathan called me once, about 2 months after the ruling. It was late, almost midnight, and his voice had the loose, unguarded quality of someone who'd been drinking just enough to say what he'd been thinking sober. Claire, I loved you. I need you to know that. Whatever my mom did, whatever I let happen, I did love you. I know you did, Nathan. But love without courage is just a feeling. It doesn't protect anyone. It doesn't build anything. It just sits inside you, keeping you warm, while the person next to you freezes. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'm sorry. I know that too. I hung up and sat in my blue bedroom and looked at the ceiling and let myself feel the full, complicated weight of a thing ending. Not just a marriage. An entire version of myself. The Claire who believed that being good and patient and accommodating would eventually be enough. The Claire who thought that if she just loved someone hard enough, they would choose her over the easier option. That Claire was gone. She had to be. She was too easy to buy. Last week, one of my fourth graders, a girl named Amara with braids and a gap-toothed smile and an opinion about everything, came up to my desk during independent reading time. She was holding a book about a woman who'd climbed Mount Everest, and she looked at me with those enormous serious eyes and said, Mrs. Whitfield, do you think she was scared? I'm sure she was, I said. Then why did she do it? I thought about that for a moment. Because the view from the top was worth more to her than the fear at the bottom. Amara thought about that with the intensity only a 9-year-old can bring to a philosophical question. Then she nodded, satisfied, and went back to her seat. I watched her walk away, and I thought about Gloria's scream echoing off courtroom walls, and Nathan's midnight apology, and the $200,000 that was supposed to make me disappear, and the blue bedroom and the Friday recesses, and the stack of papers on my desk written in the handwriting of children who still believe they can be anything. And I thought about this. Gloria was right about one thing. I am a school teacher. I make a school teacher's salary. I drive a school teacher's car. I live a school teacher's life. And none of that has ever, not for one single moment, meant that I was small. It meant that I chose to spend my days teaching children that they matter, that their voices matter, that their words on a page matter, and that no amount of money in the world can purchase the worth of a human being who knows exactly who she is. Gloria tried to buy me out with $200,000. The judge told her that wasn't enough, but the truth is that no number would have been enough. Not because I'm priceless in some fairy tale sense, but because what I have, what I've always had, the thing that Gloria never understood and Nathan lost access to the moment he took his mother's money, is something that doesn't fit on a balance sheet. It's the ability to walk into a room full of 9-year-olds on a Monday morning and make them believe they can climb mountains. You can't wire transfer that. You can't depose it. You can't structure it to avoid tax implications. You can only build it, one day at a time, with your own hands and your own stubborn, unshakable belief that the work you do in this world matters more than the money someone else made doing theirs. If you're watching this and someone has ever tried to put a price on your worth, whether it was a mother-in-law with a checkbook or a partner with an ultimatum or a boss who thinks your salary defines your value, I need you to hear this. You are not a transaction. You are not a line item. You are not a problem to be solved with a payment plan. You are a person, whole and complicated and irreplaceable, and the people who try to reduce you to a number are telling you everything you need to know about the size of their world. Let them live in it. You have mountains to climb. Thank you for watching. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and leave a comment about a time someone underestimated you and lived to regret it. I read every single one, and your story deserves to be heard. I'll see you in the next one.